let's not take credit for our father's good deeds. I was doing some research and I ran into this video entitled, quote, "Why do Slavs love Scythians so much?" unquote. Now, clearly a loaded question, but what this gentleman means to ask is, why do so many people say that Slavs are Scythians? And before I answer that question, let me just point out that this gentleman's bias is apparent in the way he pronounces Scythians. Now, I don't know why you would turn a pretty word into an ugly one, other than because you don't understand language or how to read. And I'll try to explain that in this video as well. Or perhaps because your language has basically been manipulated. Anyway, one reason why people do that is because of what Helmut from Bremen, a Saxon, I believe, whom people today would call German, states in his Chronica Slavorum, or loosely translated Slavic Chronicle, that, and let me translate for you, the Danish and the Norwegians, or Nordsmen maybe, and also the Slavs and Prussians, whom he later on in the book calls Slavs as well as other Scythian nations. So once again, the Danes, Norwegians, also Slavs and Prussians, and other Scythian nations. So clearly, Helmut from Bremen considers Slavs and Prussians, who are also Slavs to him, Scythians, and maybe even the Danes and the Norwegians. He considers them Scythians, which would make sense to me because, as I've been talking about the Suebi tribe, which, in my opinion, went north, or maybe it came from there, I don't know, at some point, and became the Swedi, or the Swedes, yeah? But also stayed basically where it was and became the Slavs, or the people that occupied what's today called Germany and Poland. Slavs, Swavians, okay? And it would make sense, seeing as all these Nordics, the modern day Germans, and Polish people have a very, very high percentage of blonde hair, blue-eyed people, right? It would make sense that they're all descended from a single ancestor who lived not that long ago. It makes perfect sense. And then you look at the etymology, like Suebi, Swedi, and Suav, Swavian. It makes perfect sense, right? That they should all be descended from the Scythians. So hopefully that answers your question. Now on to more etymology. Oh no. In the midst of my research, I wanted to find a dictionary, a Polish dictionary from way back when, and I found this. I found a Polish dictionary from 1908 that has over 1,000 pages dedicated to the words that start with the letter P. Not all of them, just from P to PROZYSCCZ. Prożyszcze. Jesus. Scythians. That's a very, very, very common letter sequence in the Polish language. Szczeci, Szczecin, Szczebrzeszyna, Szczotka, Szczur. I could just go on and on and on, right? No, they weren't Scythians at all. Anyway, did you get that? More than 1,000 pages dedicated to the words, not all of them, just most of them, that start with the letter P. Which means what? If we were to list all the words in the Polish language in 1908, it would take tens of thousands of pages of a dictionary. So what does this suggest to you? Well, clearly, you have to consider Slavic languages in general, Polish being just one dialect of that, a very ancient language that has been evolving for a very, very long time, adding words and picking up words from other languages, right? Yeah, clearly a lot of the words in this dictionary will be borrowed from other languages, so-called loan words, but that's the case with every language out there, right? But most of them are original words. Tens of thousands of pages of a dictionary of the Polish language. Can English say the same? How about German? I seriously doubt it. Because those, in my opinion, are manipulated, created, man-made languages. They're all man-made, don't get me wrong, but Slavic languages are more organic and spontaneous and naturally evolving languages. At least they were before they got raped and destroyed by the invaders. And for those of us who have studied this should come as no surprise because we understand Slavic language is related to Sanskrit. Not to say it came from Sanskrit, but it's likely that they both have a common ancestor, which would make both of them that much older, with Sanskrit today being considered the oldest written language on the planet. So if Polish or Slavic languages come from Sanskrit, or they have the same ancestor, shouldn't it be logical to assume that, I mean, it's obvious that they're all both very, very old languages, but if Sanskrit is the oldest written language on the planet, shouldn't Slavic also be a written language? An ancient language that was written down a long, long time ago? In my opinion, it is. The reason why there's very little evidence for this is because the invaders came and they burned any and all of our books, if we had any, and they definitely burned the pieces of wood on which we wrote runes. Even though that's not very correct to say, but I'll get to that in just a second, right? So clearly, Slavic languages are ancient languages with tons and tons of words in them which today have been lost or erased on purpose. And it should come no surprise to you that the people that we call Slavs in English, a lot of them, and any word has multiple etymologies potentially, so, don't think I'm contradicting myself here. There's more than one way to skin a cat, basically, is what I'm saying. But maybe the fact that the people that have so many words in their language call themselves Słowianie or Slovaks or Slovakians or Slovenians, with Słowo or Slovo meaning word, should make sense. It would make sense, right, that people who have tens of thousands of pages of words in their language, it would make sense that they would call themselves literally worders, which I will call wordsmiths for the purpose of this video, and I will try to live up to this linguistic tradition. Clearly, Slavic is an ancient language with many, many, many dialects, right? So the story goes that the Germanic people, and I guess if by Germanic you mean Scythian or Slavic, which would make sense because, again, going back to certain words having multiple etymologies, Germany, from the point of the Roman, with ger meaning gura or mountain in English, or ker, I think it is, in Croatian, like Karakorum. It's an old Sanskrit word that means kara or something like that. It means gura or ger, right? It would make sense for the people living in modern-day Italy, in Rome, to call those people in those mountains over there Germans, or that land that's full of mountains, Carpathians, the Alps, right? It would make sense for them to call those lands Germania, or mountainous lands. It would make sense. But anyway, what we're told is that it was the Germanic people that gave the Slavic people runes. If there was any evidence of the Slavs having been using the runic alphabet, or having written word, if there was any evidence that these wordsmiths had written word, it's only because they got it from their Western neighbors, the Nordics, and the Proto-Germans, the people that today are Germans, right? Okay, but if that's the case, and for those of you who don't know what runes are, it's basically an alphabet that wasn't written, but was carved mostly into pieces of wood. Very important detail. But if that's the case, and the etymology of the word rune from Old English is secret, mystery, dark, mysterious statement, or Proto-Germanic, meaning a secret, magic sign. Secret, everywhere, secret, 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 right? Okay, so the Germans say it's a secret, right? Am I right? How come they don't tell you about the Slavic etymology of the word rune? Well, because the Slavs are supposed to be slaves, because they came, they burned all of our history, and they rewrote our history for us. So they won't tell you the Slavic etymology of the word rune. It's rana. What is a rana? It's a wound. So the same way you wound yourself, which is a rana, is perhaps, very much the same thing as wounding or scarring or hurting a piece of wood, right? Scraping away material from a piece of wood is runa. Rana, runa. So who invented the runes? The people who say it's a mystery, or the people who say it's a wound? Pretty logical, right? It wasn't the Germans that gave the Slavs runes. They stole them, or maybe they shared at some point. I don't know. So, and this etymology goes deep. When you look at all these various Slavic languages, just about all of them say rana. Even in Romanian, which is no longer, well, never was, but the people that used to live in that part of the world before they were Romanized were Slavic people. But even in that language, which is a Romance language, rana is rana. Which is weird, because when you consider these basic words that are literally very carnal, right, of this body, are very intimate and personal, and the first thing that a baby may do experiencing the world on its own is hurt itself, right? Like very, very primal, basic things. It's weird that a language that the people that speak the Romanian language and supposedly have no relation to Slavic people, it's weird that they should have so many of the words in their language that are very basic words and not loan words, I would say. It's weird that those should be Slavic words, right? It's a little weird, but it makes perfect sense to me. Anyway, when you look at Germanic languages, it's wunde, wund, wonde, wound, right? Has nothing to do with rune or rana. So once again, simple question. Who invented the runes? The people who called it a secret, or the people who tell you exactly what it is? Pretty simple, if you ask me. So here's more etymology for you when it comes to runes. Opat runek, yeah. O. This is the magic of a natural, spontaneous language that evolved on its own without much manipulation. O, just like the shape that you make with your mouth, means something cyclical or round or something that encompasses, right? Like we say obvodnica, which is, that highway that connects that goes around the town, a city, and connects all the highways that shoot through the city, right? I forget what that's called in English. Obvodnica. Obrabiać means to work a piece of something from outside all the way around, basically. Obrabiać. Likewise, opatrunek, patrzeć is to look, right? So opatrzyć, opatrunek means to, what opatrunek means is it's the bandage you put over a wound, right? Runek, runa, rana. O means around. Patrzeć, patru, patrzeć. Opatrzyć, opatrunek, right? So you literally have, and this is the magic of a natural language. O means something, pat means something, runen means another thing. So you could learn very basic 3-4 letter words as a child in any language, or Polish, for example, or Slavic languages. And then you could hear a word such as opatrunek once you learn what rana is, what o means, what patrzeć means. Once you learn all those words, someone will tell you opatrunek, and if your mind hasn't been destroyed by modern ideology and brainwashing, you should be able to figure out what that is without ever having anybody explain it to you, right? Once you learn how to understand these ancient languages, it makes sense, right? Because there are very short, basic words that are essentially invented, and then they're all combined to make bigger words. And that's how you get tens and tens of thousands of different words. And it's easy to remember them because they're all made up of smaller words. And a lot of languages do this, don't get me wrong. But Polish and Slavic languages are so much more like that than English or Spanish, the other two languages that I understand, right? So that's more evidence for you that it's an ancient language. So, and you see with the word opatrunek, you see how rana becomes runa, opatrunek. So, but there's more. There's tons and tons more etymological evidence. Ricina. What is ricina? Well, if you translate it to English, it just says figure. But what figure are they talking about? Well, ricina is a woodcut or a copper plate or a lithograph, all of which are methods of stamping an image onto a piece of paper by using the woodcut as the stamp, or a piece of copper, right, soft metal that you could mold and carve into, or a stone, lithograph, right? So all these methods of creating images in which you cut into a piece of various material has one word in Polish, ricina. It's related to the word rana, runa, ricina. And then you have drzewo ryt, miedzio ryt, indicating that it's carved into a piece of that material. But in English, it just says figure. And then you have lithograph, copper plate, and woodcut is the only one that kind of tells you what it is, right? Insofar as just the English language goes. But in Polish, a Slavic language, those etymological relationships are preserved, right? Because that's where it comes. That's the language that this comes from. This is the original language. So rich means, in case we didn't, and this is where rana and runa comes from. Rich means to dig, burrow, engrave, carve. Rich, right? So, and it's from Proto-Slavic riti, rich. So you see how you get a word such as recina or drzeworyt. Pig snout, right, is a ryj. We also have the shrew. If you don't know what a shrew looks like, let me look it up for you. It's basically a little mouse with the big nose, right? A shrew. In Polish, we call that ryjówka, referring to its ryj, right? So a pig also has a ryj, and with that ryj, the pig, ryje, or it roots. In English, you say it roots because it's turning up and eating roots. It's looking for roots, right? It's rooting in the ground. But in Polish, you say ryje, which is exactly what you do when you make runes. Rich. It's the same action, whether it's a pig carving up the soil, or it's you cutting into a piece of wood, making runes, or maybe it's a plow plowing the soil. Yeah? We say orać, rich. Orać. Once again, you have the o, rać. Orać means to plow, or to work really, really hard, right? To plow. O, because you're plowing, it's a cyclical thing, right? You're going around the field, presumably, or you're plowing the entire field. Orać. There's a certain cyclical condition there being met, and you're doing it to completion, right? Orać. Rich. So, to rich means basically to carve into something, to take away material, to scratch into something. Rich, yeah? But there's also rich, which has a very specific meaning also. It denotes that you're doing the same action, rycie, rich, but it's perfect action. It's completed action, right? Vyrich means that it's done. And it means something, right? Keep that in mind. So then, when we go over to English, we have words such as right, with a W, right? But before we get to right, we have R-I-T-E. It's a right, right? Early 14th century. Rich is much older than that. Rich is right. Vyrich is right. Or right. So what is a right? Well, like a rite of passage is something, it's something that people do. It's a custom, right? But a rite of passage could be, because just as today, more so back then, not everybody was literate. Not everybody could write, especially these Germanic people to whom the runes were foreign and a mystery. For them to learn this foreign, mysterious language could have been considered some kind of a rite of passage, right? Perhaps. And then once you were able to write in this language, it became writing, to write. Vyrich. Why would you put a W there when you don't pronounce it anyway? Why do you pronounce it the same? Because it's a loan word from another language, right? What language puts letters in it and it doesn't, with no intention of pronouncing them? Chances are it came from another language and you bastardized the pronunciation, just as you did by writing it completely differently, right? The word was vyrich, or definitely some older word that was like that became right. And in English, right means to score, outline, draw the figure of something, right? But you ask any English speaker, native English speaker, what it means to write, they will tell you it means to add material to a piece of paper, perhaps, right? For the most part. You're not taking material away like Vidi or rich. You're actually adding something to a piece of paper. So it's kind of, in a way, a completely opposite action, with the end result being more or less the same. You're creating, you're putting alphabet on a page, right? But when you ask an English-speaking person, to them, to write means literally to add something to a paper, right? But when you say Vidi or rich to a Slavic or Polish speaker, they know it means to take away the material. And when it comes to writing in a modern sense, we have a different word. Because we understand that to write something, Vidi, is completely the opposite of pisać, which they say comes from the word, or is related to the word paint. The modern act of writing, the way we write today, we say pisać, okay? Which, you know, Western etymology says that it's related to the word paint. And okay, fine, I'll take that. Let's look up to write. Sorry, guys, there's a lot of information here that is difficult to get through. Paint. Let's look up paint. Paint. Painten, to represent something, decorate drawings, pictures, painted using paint, right? It's the action of adding paint to a substrate, a canvas or whatever, right? So you're adding stuff. Painted, paint, repainting, painted, pictograph, painter. All these words, mid-13th century, right? And they say that pisać, Old Slavic pisać, is related to this, right? There you go. Old Church Slavonic pisati, right? That's the word we use for modern kind of writing, pisati. But the earliest examples of to paint, which we looked up just a second ago, are from something like 13th century, right? Okay, fine. But when you look up Old Church Slavonic, which is supposed to be related to paint, pisati, well, do you know what Old Church Slavonic is? That's way older than 13th century by a couple hundred years. Old Church Slavonic, and that's a whole different story there. It's considered a Paleo-Slavic language. This is basically the church coming in and ethnically cleansing and murdering all the native Slavic people there, taking, in my opinion, their runes and translating them into this weird-looking alphabet up top, right? Taking the runes and trying to translate them in order to appeal to the people, to kind of identify with the people, but at the same time destroy their own culture and their own writing, right? And this is the 9th and 11th centuries, right? So the word pisati comes from Old Church Slavonic that predates to paint by a few hundred years, right? Because Slavic is an ancient language and English is a new, created, manipulated, man-made language, right? So even if we take the word pisati and paint, it would be very difficult to claim that it came from English. No, it's more like the other way around. It came from Slavonic or Slavic or Proto-Slavic or Scythian. That makes sense, right? So again, when you tell an English speaker to write something, they don't automatically think of taking away material. They think about putting material on a page, right? Adding material, i.e. like painting, writing. But again, Vidi or Rich to a Slavic speaker means literally the taking away of material or writing runes. And when it comes to modern writing, we have a different word for that, right? Pisać, because it's not the same thing. Because this is again an example of how we understand the original meaning of words, because we have a language that was naturally involved before it was raped and pillaged, right? So people who say write, they don't know the original meaning of that word, and they think, it means this or that. When original writing was the taking away of material. You look at any of these old alphabets and scripts, most of them contained the removal of material instead of adding it, right? And then because it was something new to the Slavs to start putting ink to a page, they gave it a new word. Whereas in English, you're still using the old word because you don't know the meaning of these words. You don't actually know the meaning. So when you tell a Slavic speaker to pisać something, they know automatically that they're adding. They might not realize this, but they know that they're adding material to a page. When you tell them to rich something, then they're going to be scratching into a surface. But there's another word for that in Slavic languages. And that word is skrobać. Skrobać. It means almost the same thing. It's still a way of removing material, but this denotes that you tend to pull, more so than not, you tend to pull the implement towards you. That's skrobać as opposed to rich. Rich is more often than not, you push the implement or you pull it along the surface of something, but when it comes to skrobać, you pull it toward you. And once again, it's like to scrape, right? To scrape carrots, to scrape the floor or whatever. Skrobać. You wouldn't say that when it comes to the floor, but whatever. Skrobać. Okay. Does that sound like anything to my Latin speakers or Spanish speakers? Scribere in Latin, right, means to write. Escribir in Spanish. If I tell you escribir, are you going to be removing material or are you going to be adding material, right? If I tell you that in Latin or Spanish or Italian, you're automatically going to think of putting material on the page. When I tell a Slavic person to skrobać, they're going to be removing material. And we have other words such as skrobia, which is starch, because that's how you extracted starch from root vegetables, right? By scraping them. Peeler is a skrobaczka. A slang term for abortion is something along those lines too, right? Because you're scraping stuff out, pulling towards you. Skrobać. So again, whether I tell you to rich or vyrich or skrobać, you know you're removing material from something. You're creating runes. When I tell you to pisać, you're adding material. But when in English I say to rich, write, or vyrich, write, you talk funny in English. It doesn't really make much sense, and no one really understands the original meaning. Just like scribere or escribir, if I tell someone in Spanish, they're not thinking of removing material, right? Because they are not using the words as they are originally meant to be used. And once a new form of writing arrived in Slavic countries, they give it a new word, pisati, pisać, from which maybe you got the word paint, seeing as that came later. So this whole idea that, insofar as Europe is concerned, right, that it was the Germanic people who gave the Slavic people writing, or the Scythian people writing, is ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense, because those are the people that call themselves wordsmiths, and there's a reason for that. Okay? I know it took me forever to explain this, And there's probably more I wanted to say, but you know, runic alphabet runes are something really magical in a sense. It's a way of taking the physical world and trying to it's like an evolution from pictographs, right? Or glyphs. From ancient Egypt, right? Petroglyphs or hieroglyphs. Glyphs writing on a stone, right? Which is from where you get the word graffiti in the English or Germanic languages, or graphic, or to graph something, to glyph something, right? It comes from Egypt because you motherfuckers is Semites. I'm sorry. Graphic. Glyph. Let's look up glyph. Right? That's something that the Greeks use. Why? Well, because they were influenced by the Semitic cultures. Right? Glyph in French. A carving to hollow out, to cut out with a knife. Glyph. Like hieroglyphs. That's why you guys talk over there, you guys talk a little bit different. That's where this comes from. But if you're saying right, you're not saying glyph, you're saying right, or with a W or just R. The reason why the connection to those original meanings of those words has been lost is probably because you were Germanized, or you were Semitized, or you were Romanized. You were invaded by and educated by a different culture, right? That's why you lost the original meaning of some of these words. So you still say right, which is rich, when if you were completely and utterly raped by these foreign cultures, you'd be saying something along the lines of glyph. But you're not. So you're speaking a language that you don't really understand. And this is the magic of a naturally evolving original ancient language. Because just as when you make the O sound, right? Turning your lips into a circle, literally. Maybe it's intuitive. I don't know how this involves, but it comes to mean in the language that same sort of action. And that's what runes are based on. When you take the letter K, for example, right? I hope I'm explaining this correctly. The K rune. This is what runes are. That's one of the theories. What runes is a way of writing what happens inside of your mouth, what your body does to make that sound. So when you make the K sound, what happens to the air? It gets shot out of your mouth, kind of like this symbol here, right? That's the K rune. K. So you could kind of see why the Romans would turn a C into a K sound. Why? Because they didn't know how to read runes. And they Romanized runes. And, they took your runes and they gave you these various alphabets. The old Church Slavonic, or whatever it was called, I forget already, or Cyrillic. That was an attempt to Romanize the ancient runic writing. That's why people say Scythian, when they really should be, what they should be saying is Scythian, because the rune for that sound is completely different. But this is why Romans write the C and make it sound like a K, when it really should sound more like a TS or S, right? Because they didn't know how to read runes, because it was magic to them. Okay? I hope this video makes sense to you. History is a lie, and it takes a lot of work and research to try to uncover the truth. Not to say that I don't make any mistakes, but I think I'm onto something here. I will list some sources in this video, in the description to this video. And if there's something I forgot, I'll bring it up in other videos. But for the time being, thank you for watching, and let's not blame the son for his father's sins. And definitely, let's not blame our brothers for their father's sin.